Lisa Koenigsberg. I'm the president and founder of Initiatives in Art and Culture. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the second in our monthly series for 2021 called All That Glitters. And we address issues pertaining to, if you will, the gold and diamond sectors, and to highlight social and environmental impacts of recycled and mined gold so that you will be provided with options for really sourcing responsibly and how to do so. So with that little framework in mind, I'm really pleased to introduce our panelists today. And I tend to be very informal in these. So first off is Phaedon Stamatopoulos. Forgive me, correct me.
That's fine.
Director of Sourcing and Refining at Argor Heraeus. And in this role, he sources gold from all over the world and in many forms. And a core activity of Argor has been establishing secure and segregated supply chains, linking individual sources and the end consumer. So we'll hear, obviously quite germane to what is to be discussed. Next, Connie Havel, Head of Supply Chains and Markets for the Alliance for Responsible Mining. You'll often hear ARM. And within her role, Connie promotes the gold industry's engagement with responsible ASM and connects responsible miners with responsible businesses. Next is Giorgio Baudet, Director of Production and Planning at Pomellato, and he has occupied that position for the past 15 years and plays a key role in brand strategy through sourcing precious metals and other materials, ensuring that the jewels are produced in a sustainable way. So directly, of course, relevant to our concerns today. And then finally, Nawal Etoksine, please correct me, who is a strategic advisor to the Responsible Jewelry Council, the world's leading standard-setting organization for the jewelry and watch industry. And I'm happy to say that I've known Nawal for a long time, so it's really wonderful to be able to engage in conversation and to continue that bond. Prior to beginning the conversation, I just want to show you a few images. Hugo, if I may ask, we're going to show just a few images from Pomellato's Kintsugi collection, which you'll hear discussed in the conversation. And Hugo, are you there? Okay. So the idea of showing these images is to give you a reference point. That's actually the last image, but can you start at the beginning, Hugo? That's the last, yeah, great. So the idea here is just to show you the philosophy of kintsugi is that celebrating a broken object and celebrating the repair makes something all the more precious because that is part of its history. So we're just showing you several images of process and a finished. If you could flip through, Hugo, that would be great. And this is the philosophy that undergirds this particular collection of Pomellatos, which will be referenced. Keep going, please, Hugo. And obviously the artisanry involved is quite meticulous. Next, please. Next, please. And this, you can see the various pertinent marks inside the ring, including a Fairmine stamp. Thank you. Okay. We can go back to full screen if you would. Thank you. Hugo, thank you. Okay, great. So what I'd like to do first is actually ask one question to all of you. And that is, how do you define responsibly sourced gold? And I'm going to do it in the order, sort of with my art historian hat on. I'm going to do it in the viewer's order, which is me. So upper left, Connie, you're first.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here today in this conversation.
Thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Of course, we know that there is no global definition of what is responsibly sourced gold, right? And therefore, unfortunately, we have many different interpretations and claims as well about the concept. So when you ask me about how I would define the concept, I deduct it from the words that make up the term, right? So when I turn it around, I ask myself, or I say, okay, the gold that is sourced responsibly, indicating that it's sourced by a company that applies responsible business practices. There is also not a clear definition of what are responsible business practices, but generally it refers to the practice of conducting business with consideration for ethical, environmental, and community goals. This in addition to being a good employer and to making a profit, right? And it can also be interpreted as gold that comes from responsible sources. So we have the source, the origin of the gold there. And when we ask where the gold comes from, it can either come from recycled sources or newly mined gold. And in the case of newly mined gold, it can come from artisanal small-scale mines, from medium-scale mines, from large-scale mines. We'll talk about recycled gold later, but in the case of newly mined gold, again, the same concept applies for me. So the individuals or the companies that are involved in the mining and in the trading of the gold, they should act under responsible business practices, taking into account the economic, the social, and the environmental factors and impacts. So responsibly sourced gold for me really is a gold that is extracted, produced, traded, and fabricated under responsible economic, social, and environmental practices. And hopefully not only that, but it generates positive social, economic, social, and environmental impacts. And as such, this definition is very much aligned with the pillars of sustainable development and what we know are the sustainable development goals.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive response. I'd like to ask Noel, please, what your how you would define responsibly sourced gold.
Well, not surprisingly, I will echo what Connie said earlier. And I would like to add that responsible sourcing is not simply the act of buying a material or a product. It's something that happens in a more holistic approach of implementing responsible practices throughout one's operations and supply chain. And therefore, to me, I would say that responsible or responsibly sourced gold is gold that has a positive value or that is not associated with a negative impact on people or planet.
Okay, Faden, please, may I ask you?
I think my answer is hopefully complementary. I see responsibly sourced gold, first of all, independently of the source of the gold, whether it's artisanal or industrial or recycled material. I mean, certain parameters need to be met. Provenance is one. This must be known. It must be clear where the material is from. As we've mentioned, it needs to be extracted, processed in a responsible and sustainable fashion. And most importantly, there needs to be a commitment from the party that sources, a commitment for positive impact. And whether this is upstream or downstream, this is a commitment which is becoming more and more important. So just to very quickly cite the OECD due diligence guidelines, operators or processors or companies are meant to disengage only with clear signs of human rights abuses. And yet the tolerance for everybody to disengage is a lot less than that. Companies will disengage with a lot less. But the consequences of disengaging can be catastrophic for the communities that depend on artisanal gold mining for livelihood. So to sum up, the commitment is key, and it's a long-term commitment. It's not a spot. It needs to last through time, through difficult times and through easy times, but it is long-term commitment.
Finally, Giorgio, please.
Hello to everyone. Okay, being an engineer, I will try to give a slightly different view. Together with Caring, Pomellato has developed the so-called environmental profit and loss. So what we have tried to do is to measure the impact of each activity on the planet, let's say, with this particular view. And so measuring what are the impacts of every activity that we do, and in general of the impact of all the supply chain on some things like water consumption, land usage, social effects. And apart from the result at the end of what seems for the measure the best one, what comes very apparent is that all along the supply chain, if you consider from the mining to the retail, because we are, as Pomellato, we are actually close to the end of the chain, what is important to focus on is actually the extraction. So we have now today focusing on the central point, because extraction of the gold is the central one. And up to our evaluation, of course, recycled gold is the one that has less impact in terms of pure impact on the soil, on the water, etc. But of course, we are including into these considerations also the social aspects. And this means that with this consideration, we include also other type of sources like fair mine, fair trade, or whatsoever. So in summary, my definition is that the less impactful gold is the more ethical and the more sustainable. And the most important part is the extraction, because that is the part that impacts more in terms of environment and to sustainability. Okay.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now is turn to you, Connie, and ask you how closely tied is the ability to track impacts with the knowledge of specific location or origin of the source?
So it's I would say it's not only closely tied, but it's a necessity, right? If I don't know the source and the supply chain of a product, I can't assess its impacts. So that means that I don't know if I do good or I do harm with my purchase, for example. So as the idea of responsible business practices is to generate positive impact, I need to ask the question, the big question, and find out where does my goal come from, and who are the actors that are involved to provide the access to this goal. So yeah, very, very closely tied, tracking the impacts with knowing the source of the products.
So what impact does the Fairmine premium generate?
So in the case of Fairmine Gold, the gold can be traced back to the origin, right? So we can evaluate the impacts. And it's really not only the Fairmine premium that creates impact. So I always say it's like at the end of the journey where we have the impact, but it's the whole certification that creates impact from the moment the mine starts working towards certification. This is really so pre-certification really is where there is a lot of impact generated, because this is where the mines work towards reaching demanding requirements, demanding legal, technical, labor, social, environmental requirements. So normally on this journey towards certification, we already create a lot of impacts. Then when the mines are certified, we create impact because they maintain this high standard and they keep improving towards even more responsible practices. And then additionally, through the payment of the Fairmine premium for the mines that achieved certification, we create impact. So these are $4 per gram of gold that these mines receive directly from the refiners that purchase the gold. And this is the incentive and the reward for complying with these demanding standards, for reaching this certification, which is not an easy task for them. And the objective of this premium is that they can achieve a long-term investment in the social, economic, and environmental sustainable development of their mining organizations and communities. And to pick out some example how this premium was used in the last years is in increased productivity, in investing in more efficient and responsible technology, in health and safety measures within the mines and communities, in improving housing, mine camps, sanitary facilities, healthcare programs in the community, environmental projects such as reforestation, educational programs in the communities, cultural support projects, and so on. So there is a variety of projects. And as we have the participants, Pomelato and Argor here today on this panel, I also wanted to give a very concrete example how a specific brand, how a refiner made a concrete impact in a Fairmine certified mine. Karen and Pomelato have been sourcing from a Peruvian Fairmine certified mine since 2018 through Argor. And they were have been the exclusive buyer of this mine throughout these years. And thanks to the payment of the premium throughout these years, they were able to invest in a new processing plant which allowed them to eliminate mercury from the processing. So we know that the work with mercury is a big issue in artisanal small-scale mining. This is really a big achievement. Normally, the elimination of mercury requires a lot of investment, and this wouldn't have been possible without the premium, or it would have been a very long process for them. So here, a very concrete impact where we see what market actors can really do in engaging proactively with responsible ASM.
That actually prompts me to turn to both Giorgio and Faden to ask them actually not about this specific collection, but and of course Noel as well, but is this notion of tracking impact and origin of source as powerful when it comes to recycled gold as it is for fair mined?
If I look from the point of view of the final customer, of course, recycled gold, I must say, is less impactful. Even if, of course, it is completely acceptable, and it is actually the bear axis of our strategy. When you talk with the customer and you explain the story that stays behind the gold by which the jewel is made, and you are able to link the jewel in itself, because we are actually able, because all the process is traced back to the mine, and you're able to connect the story of the jewel to the story of the provenance of the gold and up to the mine. And this is very effective, I must say, because it is closer, let's say, to real life, and so it touches the feelings of the people, and therefore it becomes really very, very effective also in terms of, let's say, selling ceremony. And so we also have to take into consideration that especially younger generation, but actually all the generations, are more and more interested in knowing about these aspects, and more and more willing even to pay a premium for such kind of aspects in what they are buying, and especially even more if they are buying luxury goods. So that is absolutely an added value for the customer, and this is the way in which big companies are acting, so to provide them this added value.
Yeah, that's a topic actually we very much want to further explore subsequently. Faden, what are your thoughts, if I may ask, as somebody who has, if you will, a repertoire of, or an array of gold products that you offer?
There is certainly I mean, as a refiner, we have sources from recycled material that needs to be refined, and we have sources of primary material that needs to be refined. So the two, in my opinion, need to coexist. It is clear that recycled material is better for our planet, to put it plainly, because we do not extract more than what we need, and we can take an advantage of recycling technologies which are getting more and more efficient. It is also a fact that primary mining provides livelihood for hundreds of millions of people. So that's where then provenance becomes the sort of the binder between these two concepts. As long as you know exactly where the material coming from and how it is processed and by whom, at least then you can be sure that the responsibility and the social part is covered and clear. And then you can quantify, your environmental footprint with some hard facts. But I would be cautious in preferring one type of sourcing over another without at least appreciating what it means for for the communities or people involved in that processing or extraction.
Yeah. Noel, your thoughts?
Yeah, we often hear indeed that one or the other is better from either an environmental or social point of view, as we've heard. Strategies differ depending on companies. And each company is actually at liberty to decide whatever they think is best for them. However, what is important in both types of sourcing is the knowledge of the supply chain. Responsible practices or responsibly sourced does not only apply to primary material, it also applies to recycled material. When you know the source, when you've applied due diligence criteria to this sourcing, you can also demonstrate that it has a positive value and not only a negative value.
So thank you so much. And so Connie, then how do you, given the social impact, if you will, of ASM, how do you address the manufacturer who wants to use a variety of products, not exclusively ASM?
It's very difficult, or it would be very difficult to only source from certified ASM, and generally that the trend is to have a responsible sourcing mix, right? Maybe for small buyers, for small jewelers, they can develop an exclusive certified ASM sourcing policy where they only engage with certified ASM gold, for example. But it wouldn't be possible for bigger ones just because the supply is not yet there, right? So in general, our conversation is about the responsible sourcing mix. And there are various sources. So there is recycled gold, there is certified ASM gold, there is now also certified LSM gold, large scale gold from large scale mining. And there are issues to address in all the different categories, right? So our proposal is to have a responsible sourcing mix that is composed of these different sources. But of course, as an organization that has been focusing on the work with ASM for more than 15 years, we suggest that any responsible gold sourcing mix includes gold from responsible ASM, because this is really where the biggest impact can be made in terms of in social terms, which can't be that much covered. Well, there is not a social factor in the recycled gold, right? It's more the environmental impact, as Baden pointed out. And in the case of LSM, there are not so many people involved as with ASM. So the biggest social impact, but also environmental impact, can be made in engaging with responsible ASM. So our proposal is a mix and the inclusion, very important, the inclusion of responsible ASM gold.
Faden, I'm wondering, can you tell us, please, about the gold products that Argor has in its portfolio and what prompted, if you will, the breadth and the inclusion of fair mined and recycled?
So, I mean, Argor's main activity is not refining. So refining is merely the engine that powers the downstream business, which is basically investment commodities such as cast bars or minted bars, but more importantly, the semi-finished watch and jewelry components for these type of companies, so watchmakers, luxury jewelry, upper range jewelry manufacturers, and so on. So the days of having a refinery as a sustainable business just the refinery are gone. There is a huge overcapacity in the world of refining, and therefore already 30 years ago, we branched out into more specialized and integrating vertically in the processes of our customers and our markets. With regards to your question as to how we have included Fairmind or other type of material in our supply chains, this is because we run segregated lines which are dedicated to our customers, and the mix in each of these segregated lines is dictated by the ESG strategies of our customers. We are a service provider, and sourcing and provenance is one of the services that we offer to our customers. So if a customer says, I want material from mine A, but not mine B, we offer that. If another one says, I want artisanal mine material and fair mined, but not recycled material, this is something that we cater for.
Giorgio, what is the relationship between Pomelato's gold supply and the values that the house and Kering have advanced?
So, as I was saying, Kering, since the beginning of its history, has put sustainability at the heart of its strategy. Both because, first of all, they want to, because willing to do that is the first point, and second, because they feel that this is also a way to guarantee a longer perspective on the business. So now it is absolutely a must-have, and as I was saying, and we consider this absolutely an added value, and that we try to guarantee as much as possible to our final customer. Guarantee means also being certified against certain certification schemes, etc. So sensitivity on that is for sure increasing, because as I was saying, customers more and more interested in that. And so we use those as a central strategy. And of course, we mix how do we give value with the gold to our products. We mix, of course, that ingredient that becomes one of the guest star of our jewels with the other ingredients typical of our DNA. So if I can, for example, make a couple of examples, we have a line in which we use Fairmind gold that is a solitary line, so with white diamonds. It means mixing this kind of gold with the top line of our production, so with the luxury at the maximum level. Or otherwise, we mix this gold with another bearing axis of our production, let's say, that is creativity and innovation. So for example, we saw before the Kintsugi collection, in which we have used a completely new material, applied a Japanese technique to our production. So I would say that this is like one pillar among the other ones, which are creativity, innovation, luxury, and let's say, yes, absolutely, sustainability and craftsmanship of our products. So it is not used by itself as a value in itself, but it is like a player in a team, but a very important one. And it's absolutely our strategy to continue to do that, because we feel that is very important. And this is reflected, of course, in many other activities that Pomellato does, also in terms of social responsibility, women support, etc. So.
Noel, you represent an organization with a very robust and important membership. And I'm wondering if the breadth of your membership impacts the definition of responsibly sourced, and how you assist members in meeting the objective of accessing and using responsibly sourced gold as you define it?
I think it all starts with sourcing responsibly. Before sourcing responsible gold, you need to source and act responsibly. As you said, the RJC has a quite large and diverse membership, which is now over 1,350 members, spanning the entire supply chain from mine to retail across more than 70 countries. What's interesting here is, and what is unique to the RJC, is that its members share the same values and commit to implement responsible practices in their internal operations, how they deal with their business partners, and how they source materials. So those responsible practices are defined in the RJC's Code of Practices, which is the mandatory standard, which has evolved over the last 15 years to be fit for purpose and support companies on their sustainable journey. This Code of Practices covers prominent topics for responsible business around 6 main sections. So the general requirements, a specific section dedicated to responsible supply chains, responsible sourcing and due diligence, labor rights and work conditions, health and safety and environment, some material-specific requirements around product integrity and disclosure, and responsible mining provisions. So this code specifically addresses the topic that we usually associate with responsible sourcing around supply chain due diligence, sourcing from conflict-affected and high-risk area, human rights due diligence, sourcing from artisanal and small-scale mines, and encouraging engagement with mining communities. It's important to know that this Code of Practices is now in its 3rd version, which was released in 2019, and is aligned with the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the OECD Due Diligence Guidance for Responsible Supply Chains of Minerals from Conflict-Affected and High-Risk Areas, and the ILO Convention. So this code and the subsequent work that the RJC has undergone in its theory of change help companies move from mere compliance to actually creating impact. And the more a business understands about its supply chain and manages due diligence processes, the more it can ensure that its materials are sourced responsibly and its products made responsibly as well. So the RJC members are required to perform detailed KYC, so know your counterparty, and due diligence on their gold supply chains, tracing back as far as possible through their supply chain to the refiner at a minimum. They must ensure that the refiner has conducted due diligence on their sources of material. There is also a second, which is a second standard, it's a voluntary standard that the RJC has developed, which is the chain of custody. And Argo is a member of the RJC and certified according to those 2 standards. This chain of custody standard focuses on material identification, segregation, and tracking. How does the RJC help its members, apart from the code in itself and implementation and verification of the implementation of the code? Collaboration and partnerships are an essential element of the RJC's strategy. It's one of the 3 pillars of the RJC to support responsible sourcing. This includes partnerships with various organizations such as ARM, who has a permanent seat at the RJC Standards Committee, the recognition of the Fair Mine Standard and other certification systems, the collaboration with, for example, the Swiss Better Gold Association, who also sit at the standards committee and is also involved in sourcing from artisanal and small-scale mines. Two more things. In October 2020, the RJC also signed the joint call to the industry to include ASM in their supply chain. And lastly, I will just mention that the RJC offers a significant amount of supporting guidance to members and non-members, because everything is freely available on the website, with templates, policies, checklists, toolkits, etc., to support companies who want to embark on their sustainability journey.
Faden, I'm wondering, how do you work with clients with regard to the various responsibly sourced gold options? And how do you address what might be benefits, challenges, and impacts of each? Do you provide counsel? Do you meet their requests? How does Argor function with respect to this?
Well, all sources need to be vetted, validated. All sources need to be, their provenance needs to be established, and the extraction or the procurement of metal must be the same. For us, the challenge, I guess, is having to deal with a very diverse group of customers who have very different ESG strategies or sourcing policies. At the base are all the standards, sort of all the industry standards that are issued, whether it's the LBMA Responsible Gold Guidance, the OECD guidance, the RJC, COC, COP standards, where and when applicable for the type of material. All these standards and all these certifications are the base. Let's say they are the bare minimum. On top of that, companies have their own expectations and ESG aspirations, which are aimed for some sort of impact, whether it's environmental or whether it's social. So it's very complicated, but rewarding, because in the end, it's recognizing that there is diversity in what companies want as sourcing. You're not simply one size fits all.
Giorgio, can you comment on Pomelatto's gold supply?
At the moment, we are focused. Our strategy is completely reflected in the sources described in the RJC COC certification. So we base on the definition of which are the eligible materials for the COC certification. So this includes theoretically, recycled materials, gold mined from COC certified miners or ASM miners, and then grandfather materials, the one that has been refined before 2012. For the moment, we have decided, this information are completely available, as Nawal was saying, on the website of RJC, so public and can be very easily found. At the moment, we are focusing our supply on the recycled gold, which is available also in a sufficient quantity first, because as Connie was saying, actually fair mine gold is not sufficient for the total production, hypothetically total production that we have to do. And so the recycled one is the central one, and plus some lines that are made with the fair mine or fair trade gold. So these are presently our choice. And important to say is that we as Pomellato, drive this kind of choice also along the entire supply chain. Because I feel that big brands have also this responsibility and also this possibility that is to drive the market in certain directions. So, for example, try to push people that stay around us to have certain kind of certification, to buy gold under certain type of schemes. And so it's a lucky position from our point of view, that is to be able to somehow influence the entire market. So Pomellato, since many years ago, is now buying the 100% of its gold according to these ethical standards, let's say, that is a mix of POC sources, plus actually other initiatives that we consider particularly interesting. So particular projects for the reduction of mercury use in the refining, or for reforestation projects, etc. But let's say that the biggest part is based on recycled and fair mine.
Just a quick question, which is, how did you choose to use fair mind in the Kintsugi collection? Is there a relationship between the philosophy of the sourcing and the philosophy of the collection, if you will?
Actually, yes, absolutely yes, because I would say that I used to say that that is the most philosophical of our collections, for the many meanings that it has intrinsically. So the idea of using waste material, which is intrinsically sustainable, let's say, but even more than this is the upscaling of the use. So it is giving value to waste, creating a new object, giving new life to this. And so it's like giving value to imperfections, and so somehow underlying an idea of inclusion. And given the time being with the pandemic, I would say that is also recovering broken parts and giving new life to those parts is also somehow a symptom of compassion, resilience. So it's a very, I feel it is a very nice idea, philosophy behind these things. And it's very interesting also, if I can say that, we cover basically all the world, because the stones are produced by an artist in Japan. The gold is mined in Peru, so side of the world, and everything is kept together by the Italian savoir-faire and the craftsmen. So very happy about it.
Noel, I know something that is at the heart of the RJC, which is the relationship between using responsibly sourced materials and the SDGs. For example, measurable benefits to women, and how does the RJC assess these benefits?
As you rightly say, Lisa, responsible sourcing can contribute to many SDGs, including SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 8, decent work, SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 16, peace, among others. And by contributing to the SDGs is intertwined with adherence to the 42 provisions in the RJC's Code of Practices, as the code really aligns with a number of those SDGs. In 2020, the RJC went further by completing an SDG mapping and materiality assessment based on its Code of Practices, and launched a project, which is the revision of the theory of change, and which is called RJC's 2030 Roadmap to Delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. This roadmap outlines the three pillars of RJC strategy: members first, partnerships for progress, and advocacy for positive change. And this roadmap, outlines how this strategy will contribute to achievement of short-term, medium-term outcome, and eventually longer-term impact. The impact is linked to priority SDGs, 5, 8, 12, 16, and 17, and presented according to the 5 pillars of sustainable development: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. In parallel, a new set of ESG metrics for the members linked to priority SDGs and associated code of practices provisions have been developed. And these will complement the data that is already collected from members on members' performance during the audit, the recertification audit process. By capturing and reporting on progress, RJC members are able to demonstrate and disclose their actions and outcomes for each of the SDGs, including towards responsible sourcing. And this allows also RJC to collect comparable data and relevant data on members' contribution to the SDGs. Ultimately, this will help to assess progress, facilitate reporting, support decision-making by certain stakeholders, by clients, by investors, and importantly, promote behavioral change and encourage more sustainability-inspired action across the industry. On the specific SDG 5 that you mentioned, this is embedded into the Code of Practices in 2 different provisions. The one on human rights, on supply chain and human rights due diligence, and the one on labor rights and working conditions, the implementation of which is verified by auditors during the recertification audit of members. I would like also to add that the RJC has embarked on a series of events with the goal of promoting generation equality and SDG 5, mobilizing the watch and jewelry industry by initiating roundtable dialogue called Generation Equality SDG 5 in Action. There was a first step with the launch of a roundtable some time ago, and ultimately the objective is to build partnerships and drive positive change and action on the ground. So the project will include sharing best practice, supporting companies with tools, how to integrate gender equality, diversity, and inclusivity at the heart of business culture, also as part of the implementation of the Code of Practices. And last thing on that is that there will be different regional dialogues that will be held in the coming months to explore the regional perspective on gender equality opportunities within the jewelry supply chain.
So, Connie, I wanted to ask you, given the clear social benefit and impact, if you will, of ASM, how this particular challenge can be addressed, and that is that ASM certified gold is perceived as pricey. And how can a lower price point be achieved? Will scalability have an impact on that? Or would you maintain that a different perspective toward the premium should be instilled? So it's kind of a dialectical question.
Well, generally said, a quality product normally, a high quality product normally always is of at a higher price, right? The consumer is willing to pay for that if we communicate why it's a high quality product. So just saying so in general, but yes, of course, there's always, so I feel that there has been a tendency, there has been an increased interest in the industry in engaging with ASM, which has been a step forward, because if we would have had this conversation 5 years ago, it would have been different. There was more of this disengagement strategy that already has been mentioned before. So we see that there is already a positive step towards really engaging with ASM, and not just a certified ASM, but also with ASM that is on its pathway towards more responsible practices in market actors, and promoting and supporting the progressive development of ASM. So that is a positive trend that we have been perceiving in the last years. But yes, the price discussion, or the price, is always a barrier to this engagement, right? In general, sourcing from ASM is more pricey because of the volumes, because it's very, very different if you buy 1 kilo or 3 kilo or 50 kilos or 200 kilos, right? So there is a significant difference, just if we look at transportation costs, export costs, and so on. So in general, sourcing from ASM is more expensive. So scaling up, of course, helps. What we try to facilitate is, for example, clustering mines, or clustering responsible mines that are in a certain region, help to coordinate that they can sell together, doing it through local aggregators, for example, so that we can increase the volumes of the gold that is traded, and thereby decrease these transaction costs, right? So definitely, if this can be scaled up, so the scaling up will help to decrease prices. So this is definitely one strategy there. But regarding the premium, I mean, we often hear that, well, responsible business practice or responsible gold shouldn't come at an extra price. This should be like a given, right? But this is just not, I mean, this would be ideal, right? If the world would be ideal, but it's unfortunately not reality. And what we see is that we need this incentive for the mines to start this pathway towards more responsible practices. Because the truth is that there is always a local buyer that is willing to pay a good price for the gold, and that doesn't ask any questions how this gold was mined. So there is really a competition there. And if we want to incentivize the miners, well, the biggest incentive for them is a financial incentive, right? So this premium is really, in most cases, the reason why these mines even start this journey towards reaching fair mine certification, for example, and which is a long journey. It's a tough journey. It's not something that they can do from one day to the other. Normally, it's a process of at least 6 months up to 2 years or longer. And it needs a lot of investment. It needs a lot of commitment. And these miners won't start this journey if they don't have this reward afterwards. If they don't receive this premium, which they can invest in the improvement and development of their mines. So from our point of view, it's not a viable option to eliminate this premium at that point. But on the other hand, the market should recognize that responsible practices come at a higher price, and we should raise awareness and educate the consumer why there may be a price difference. So although what we hear that what we hear the feedback from the makers that work with fair mine gold is that in the end, the price difference on the end consumer product is not that significant. And if with the additional value that you have, the additional story that you have, the assurance that you can give to your customer about the origin, the responsible origin of the gold, and the positive impact that they can make with this purchase, the consumer normally is more than willing to pay this little extra price.
Another kind of probing question, which is something I'm deeply interested in. How does Argor address areas of known heightened conflict when dealing with sourcing gold? And in such a context, how is gold demonstrated to be conflict-free?
Well, I mean, again, quoting what I mentioned at the beginning, in theory, it would be possible to source from very, very many countries where today there are partial conflicts or suspicions of conflicts, and respecting all the guidances and standards that govern the industry. However, the tolerance and the potential risks, unfortunately, far outweigh this this procedure. So, to answer your question as to how does one avoid, for sure, due diligence has evolved, and let's say the development of additional responsibilities or activities of due diligence that are now assumed to be, let's say, standard for a company such as a refinery. For example, impact of biodiversity, human rights assessment, impact on environment, social communities, gender issues, and so on. All these, they need, or as a refiner, we need the support of committed and dedicated stakeholders. So we are not, as a refiner, we are not experts on biodiversity, but we are responsible to the extent that when we do need to carry out this type of assessment, we will refer to the specialists. We will ask the opinion of stakeholders who have this as their core activity and who are able to provide a detailed summary or assessment of the situation. So similarly, if we want to assess sourcing from a zone which is considered to be at risk, this has absolutely no business relevance whatsoever. The only reason why it would be done would be to showcase that it is possible to source from this country, and that with the correct support of local or committed stakeholders, the supply chain from difficult areas can still be established, which in a way is exactly the same principle as we have been talking for artisanal mining. Sometimes these examples are the ones that pave the way for others to also see it is possible, provided that one is selective and has partners and stakeholders that will support and provide the necessary guidance.
Yeah. Nawal, how do you ensure that RJC members act responsibly regarding sourcing? And how do you provide them with updated information regarding sourcing and potential problems as situation evolve? Because of course, the world is constantly changing, so situations are constantly developing.
Indeed, it's a always moving landscape, including the regulatory landscape. Acting responsibly regarding sourcing is a thorough step-by-step process that RJC members have to go through. It starts with implementing the management systems for responsible practices, engaging with your business partners, communicating and discussing your supply chain policy and requirements with them, as Giorgio mentioned earlier, embarking your business partners with you in your sustainability journey, finding solutions together, and ultimately creating a ripple effect within the supply chain and the wider supply chains. From a purely technical point of view, the RJC members will start with implementing their policies, will also conduct a self-assessment in preparation for the audit, and their compliance will then be assessed by a third-party accredited auditor against the detailed code of practices. This the auditors will review that members are implementing the various policy requirements, conducting the necessary KYC and due diligence on their supply chains. The auditor will also check that the members have their own systems in place to ensure they remain aware of potential or actual issues arising in their supply chain, which is especially important, for example, when they amend a relationship with an existing supplier or start a relationship with a new supplier, source from a new country or source a new material. What the RJC does to support their members is that it closely monitors the development of not only the regulatory landscape, but also the wider responsible sourcing environment. The RJC will update the guidance and tools on a regular basis to ensure that the members have the latest information and that the standards reflect the current best practices. It also organizes on a regular basis webinars, training sessions, issues newsletters, and frequently asked questions from members, in addition to having a help desk to answer and address any queries that the members may have in relation to responsible sourcing or responsible practices.
Giorgio, since we're sort of talking about quote unquote holistic practices, I'm wondering what the house's attitude is towards sourcing regarding other products used in jewelry.
Of course, the approach remains the same. So fortunately, in jewels, the ingredients are not a lot. So apart from gold, we have silver, basically, diamonds, and color stones. First step has been to cover the gold, which is the most used material for us, and that is something that we consider more or less completed. Next step will be to cover silver and color stones, which have been included in the scope, actually also of the new Code of Practices certification, became central for silver and also color stones. So next step will be the silver that will be covered more or less with the same philosophy of the gold. We are working with diamonds that among our stones are the most advanced, of course, because they are more precious, and the people are working on that since a longer time. So there are all the issues related to the Kimberley process that is now assessed. But now there are also novelties, let's say, because, for example, GIA is now providing a new service additional to what was present before, the so-called diamond origin report. So they are able to trace the finished products coming from a rough material. So they can, in that case, declare also clearly the country of origin of the diamonds. And that is a step further, very important regarding diamonds. We're working on color stones, which are for sure included in a much more challenging world, starting from the most precious one, emeralds, rubies, and sapphires, which are also the ones on which also RJC is focusing for the first focus groups and the pilot test. We're participating with RJC to try to improve and keep also this supply chain under control. And in this case, what we are presently doing is to work closely with the mines. So it is more possible than in the past. And so this is another important part of the journey, let's say. It is not finished. Absolutely not. It must be seen as a continuous improvement process, because world is evolving, certification is evolving, regulations are changing, and therefore what is important is always trying to be updated and try to push a little farther the limit. And because in some cases still a long way has to be run yet. Okay.
We're going to turn to some questions now that have come in. Before we do so, I'd just like to comment that a conversation like this is, if we were sitting here 10 years ago, would not have happened in this way. And the discourse and exchange about progress, how it's initiated, what are the values, what are we striving to do, how do we integrate sources, how do we integrate goals and, if you will, supplies. They are, as Giorgio said, it's an ongoing process. And I'm very happy to say that we are welcoming today actually a class from SCAD, which is a fabulous school in the United States. And this conversation is actually being live streamed to them. And I just wanted to put this out there because when we were in school, a conversation like this didn't happen. And it's going to be so interesting to come together in a year or in 2 years to keep the conversation, the openness, the communication, and the collaboration all across the spectrum open. And so, Connie, I wanted to just actually, before we go into questions, sort of ask you, and very briefly, you know, the Fairmind, you speak about the story. For me, it's encompassed in the image of the miner who has Amor on his hand with the Fairmind card. Is there something you would like to, you know, cite as a particular, I hate to say this because it sounds a bit too Madison Avenue, but a soundbite about the importance of Fairmind as part of the spectrum of options?
Well, yeah, the story is obvious. It's obviously one of the main benefits for the brands that work with Fairmind, right? Because we know storytelling is becoming more and more important when promoting products and so on. So it's a marketing strategy that has been promoted for quite some time. And of course, also something that we are using in promoting Fairmind, right? But I mean, we need to think about what's really behind that. And it's lives behind that, right? It's a story about lives that really depend on this activity. There are so many artisanal and small scale miners out there that just depend on this activity to make a living, to sustain their families. And it's really something that I have experienced in my 7 years that I've been working for ARM, is when those that buy the gold can really travel to a community and get to know the miners and get to know the people. They really understand. This is just really when we understand what the story is. Because normally, I mean, these are very different circumstances that that we are living in. I mean, I live in Colombia, but in the US and Europe, if you go to a mining community in Colombia and Peru, you really dive into a very different life, into a very different context. And you meet people that really struggle in their everyday life, and they dig for gold to sustain their families, right? So it's right. We really try with Fairmine to give it a human touch to all the gold trade and to create these human connections, because these are really livelihoods that depend on that and that are behind the gold extraction, which is then transformed into such valuable products, luxury products. And what's really at the very beginning of the supply chain is a humble miner that wants to support his family and his community. So this is what we really try to do.
Okay, then to the questions, and we'll go through them one by one. And this one is not directed at a particular person. I encourage you all to take this on. From Juliette de la Rochefoucauld, who is a very distinguished jewelry historian and commentator. Her question: for the moment, we are just taking the word of designers and jewelry companies in the industry that their gold is responsibly sourced or reused gold. How can we strengthen ethical gold's footprint at the risk of being provocative? Quote, surely this is window dressing.
Maybe I can start at least partially answer this. I think the process has been that in the past there has been a lot of awareness over the problem, and that is the first step. I think it became clear to stakeholders, consumers, so everybody along the chain, what the problems were. They were a lot more transparent. They became more transparent, and everybody became more aware. As a result, guidances, standards, and regulations caught up. And I think we are at a stage where now these issues have the support of the necessary and appropriate tools in order to be resolved and or mitigated. On top of that, with the aid of technology, there are also innovative ways to ensure provenance and source integrity. I can quote just a few of them that are on the market. But as a refiner, we also are able to use DNA tracing or metallographic techniques in order to ascertain provenance of material and basically integrity of the supply chain, as well as with the use of technology for bar integrity and product integrity that goes into the downstream industry. So I think we've been helped by a parallel improvement, both of standards, both of regulations, awareness in the public, and the technological tools at our disposal.
Okay, very comprehensive, thank you. So we go to the next one. From Laura Cass, I'm interested in learning the specifics of the best way to responsibly source gold. And perhaps the response is where she can go to specifically acquire this knowledge. I'm not sure. However you wish to answer.
Talking from the point of view of almost the final user, I will say that the entities that we have in this panel could be already a very good guide. I mean, I would say that it's easier than expected. We you can easily find informations contacting, I feel, directly the refiners or the ARM organization, if you're interested in. They are usually, my personal experience is that all of them are very much more than available to help according to the project that one has. It is not necessary to be a big group, even if probably Connie prefer, but no, she doesn't prefer, she likes small friends as well. So I feel that
I love them all.
Okay. So I feel that most important is the commitment to do that, and you can find your own way to support and to improve the business of sustainable gold. So, in the network of the RGC, for example, in the network of ARM, it's very easy.
So to complement in the case of interest in buying certified ASM gold, this is possible through the Fairmind initiative, right? And as Giorgio said, it's maybe easier than one may think, right? So there today there is a broad network of suppliers, most of them in the US and in Europe, available to provide a Fairmind certified gold from mines all over the world. They have it on stock. It's there is a frequent supply. So if one wants to access a certified ASM gold and, for example, Fairmind gold, this is available easily. So just reach out to our organization. Go to www.fairmind.org and write to us, and we will happily help you to access this gold.
From Mark Hanna of Richline, what is the form of the documented chain of custody, and how is this verified and audited?
Can I volunteer? Or
Pardon?
is that, can I volunteer, or
Oh, absolutely.
am I stepping on any toes here? Virtually, anyway.
No.
I would add to that. I would phrase the question a bit differently. The question is, what is the document chain, and how is that audited in a supply? Was that the question?
The question is exactly, what is the form of the documented chain of custody, and how is this verified and audited?
Okay. I mean, when we're talking about, from our side, when we're talking about the documentation we receive from the source, we're talking about export documents or airway bills or pro forma invoices, basically information that mainly focuses on the value of the material. However, as I mentioned before, technological advances are now such that this is just a basic requirement. Let's say it's the first tick in the box. What we look for beyond that is deviations in material quality, changes in composition, basically indicators and evidence whether the material has been tampered with physically or not. So the documentation actually which is analyzed is not particularly complex, but all the technological advances focus on the material itself, which is much more important, at least in our view, to have a good sense of whether it has been tampered with and whether it comes from a proper source or not.
Anyone else to this? Okay. This one specifically for Giorgio. Were the gemstones used for the rings originally cracked or damaged?
Yes, they were cracked during the working steps, because those stones, which is jet or Kogolong, are used also in the standard collection. So that shape, that square shape of the rings, for example, are the same stones used for other products, damaged when mounting on the standard items. And then the idea was to exactly picking them from the waste and reusing them. Yes, so they were broken along the process, the previous one.
Okay, we have 3 more questions and I'm going to try to squeeze them in. The next one for Pomolato. Could you please define recyclable gold post-consumer? I think she means recycled, but could you please define recyclable gold post-consumer gold? Could you please describe your gold volume sales by sourcing traceable to the source, fair mind, fair trade, recycled, question mark, post-consumer, question mark. Has it evolved in the past 10 years? How has it evolved?
So, as in everything, the demand drives the offer. So 10 years ago, the refiners like Argor were unable to provide certified, refined, recycled gold, for example, because they needed to have a certain number of customers asking for that, and therefore being able to set a line, able to do that. So 10 years ago, basically, gold was bought from banks or refinery, but without any kind of specific requirement. In the last years, this became the standard. So and therefore also the offer of these materials is increased. I mentioned before the silver. So a couple of years ago, COC recycled silver was basically not available. Now is available on the market, and therefore one can start to buy it if he wants. So the market is following, as I was saying, the regulations, the demand of the customer. So it's like increasing the level from all the sides to be balanced. So the last 10 years, the offer and also I would say the knowledge of the matter in all the companies increased a lot. So now all the companies are very well aware of what this means, what that means, what COC means. And therefore, it is also a question of an improvement in the education of the entire supply chain. So more and more the companies are aware of these aspects, and this for sure will contribute to further developments. Hope to have answered the question.
Okay, the next and penultimate question is for Phaedon, although first I'm asked to thank you, and I guess me, for generously sharing your time and insights. And it comes from Christina Mall. Does Argor trace its gold sourcing back beyond the point of transport to point of origin? Will the Swiss refiners voluntarily take on the responsibility to trace their own gold supply that the EU has recently imposed on EU countries? There's a specific example here, I can go into that, but for example, if a Swiss refiner buys gold from Dubai, how can that be considered, quote, responsible if the gold may well have been illegally smuggled out of a different country? This is just by way of example, knowing that Dubai is not the only problem. End of question.
Okay, it's a long question, and the answer is simple. It's yes. How do we qualify and quantify this? Yes, we as a company, we are required to know where every single source of our gold comes from. There is The exception to the rule is when one is dealing with a counterpart that is responsible for some further gathering of gold, but in very clear standards as the LBMA responsible gold guidance, then one has to be unequivocally convinced that the due diligence of the counterpart is sufficient to be able to deal with the uncertainties or the issues in the supply chain, and preferentially at any single stage anyway, we want to be the direct link to the source. So the answer is yes. Every ounce of gold that enters the refinery needs to be accounted for, and material of dubious origin has no room in the type of business that is expected for us in order to continue to have a social license to operate.
And I think the last question I would ask of Nawal, it's from Caitlin Purdy. And are jewelers and other consumers of gold willing to pay a higher price for gold sourced responsibly from ASM?
The examples of Fair Mind, Fair Trade, and Swiss Better Gold Association show that jewelers are willing to pay a premium to support the creation of impact at the level of the ASM and contribute with the premium to very specific projects. However, one needs to keep in mind that for jewelers who use large volumes of gold, paying a premium may become a very expensive exercise that sometimes consumers are not necessarily willing to support, depending on the additional cost that is added to the jewelry. We should also keep in mind that gold is not a commodity like bananas or coffee. That it's easy to buy a kilo of coffee with a premium. It's more expensive to buy a kilo of gold with a premium. But I'm sure that the industry will find clever ways to continue to support ASM and the development of ASM, the creation of impact, and at the same time answer customers' demand of traceability, better of also sometimes lower prices.
Lisa, may I compliment or make a comment there? So I think it's easier to sell a jewel with a premium than coffee with a premium, because the coffee is an everyday product, and it's more difficult to make the decision every week to pay more for the product that I consume a lot than in the case of jewelry. For example, jewelry, a high value product that I don't buy that often, but that often has an emotional value. I buy jewelry to feel better myself, or to give it to someone special in a special occasion, or to mark a special occasion. So I think the decision to pay some $40 or euros more for a ring that costs $700 in such a special occasion, it's much easier than to take the decision for the bag of coffee that I maybe buy every week. But we don't have studies about that, but yeah, my personal opinion, selling both certified coffee. I also was engaged in that before, so I've promoted both, and I think it's easier to promote the jewelry with the premium.
The volumes are not the same.
If I can add 10 seconds, the cost of the gold is just a part of the cost of the jewel, especially when you are talking of high jewelry, and therefore I think no one will complain for the 40 euro more for each gram of gold that you're buying for a jewel. So, and it never reported to me because we are selling those products, and no one told me they don't buy because they didn't buy because it was too expensive for the gold. So I think that is not a problem, at least in certain kind of products.
But at the moment, the issue is that there is not enough gold to of that category to meet the demand anyway.
In the case of Fairmint, the Fairmint supply is higher than the demand at the moment. So there is sufficient gold for anyone who wants to engage. No problem there currently.
Well, we can have that discussion in another conversation.
Well,
happy to do so.
on that note, this is a conversation that we very much hope to continue. I should say, actually, more affirmatively, we plan to continue. And additionally, expanding on the realm of the consumer and the consumer's interests and predilections, as well as how to meet a spectrum of definitions of what constitutes responsible sourcing, and how to shepherd a diverse group with various points of view, but all of whom adhere to a basic principle, which is responsible sourcing, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to discuss the array of options today for responsibly sourcing gold, recognizing that I think it was Giorgio who said, one size does not fit all, and that there are a range of solutions. And with that, I want to thank each of you for joining us today. This was exciting and provocative, thought-provoking, and it's such a pleasure to have the benefit of your insights and conversations, and I look forward to ongoing collaboration with each of you and your organizations as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
very
you,
much.
Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to you. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye-bye.
all for coming and joining us.